Hi again. So, in the last chapter, chapter 18, we read that Mr. Hickey had been hanged. So, let's see if they're going to catch up with Master Lockton or not. Okay. Most heartily we beseech thee with thy favour to behold our most gracious sovereign Lord King George, and to replenish him with the grace of thy Holy Spirit. The minister paused to draw breath. And bless our gracious Queen Charlotte, their Royal Highnesses George, Prince of Wales, the Princess Dowager of Wales, and all the royal family. The Reverend had so much beseeching to do for the royal family, I thought we'd be stuck in church for a week. Trinity was an Anglican church filled with prayers for England, burning incense, and ministers in fancy dress. It discommoded me some to attend, but Madam gave me no choice, so I had to go. At home, we went to the Congregational church with 10 pews, windows that looked out to the ocean, and a preacher who always wore black. I liked it better. Incense made me sneeze. We humbly beseech, and they did a pack of beseeching at Trinity. The church was more than half empty compared to the first Sunday Madam brought us, what with so many folks melting into the countryside, like Master Lockton. Martha Washington and her ladies were north on the island, and those left in the pews were all loyalists. This made matters easier for the Reverend, who could pray the way he wanted without worry of insulting men who owned the rebel cannons. Ruth bounced her corn-husk doll on her lap and flew it through the air. Some folk grumbled about servants and slaves being forced to sit in the upstairs gallery. To my mind, being in the upstairs meant we were closer to God, and our prayers got there first. Besides, nobody upstairs fussed when Ruth played on the floor. Lighten our darkness, we beseech thee, O Lord, and by thy great mercy defend us from all perils and dangers. I beseech thee, O Lord, this is what Isabel's thinking. By thy great mercy, take us home. By the hand of Colonel Regan, take us home. In all thy glory, take us home. That's what Isabel's thinking in her head. Ruth tugged on my skirt. It was time to stand up again and pray. Below us, Madam leaned against the sturdy figure of Lady Seymour, who had come to the house early and forced Madam out of bed and into a Sunday dress. She covered the bruises still visible on Madam's face with a thick white layer of Molyneux's Italian paste, and told her she must not show weakness. We sat down again. Up, down, up, down. Your minister could never make up his mind. My belly grumbled. Good thing the services were drawing to a close. Just a little more beseeching, a few more amens, and we'd head home for cold pigeon pie and sour pickles. Ooh, pigeon pie. Ruth's fingers drifted to her nose for some unsightly digging. Ooh. As I reached for her hand, the front door of the church slammed open with a thud. The Reverend near fainted with surprise. A young boy ran halfway down the center aisle. "Begging pardon, Reverend," he shouted, "but the British have sailed into the harbor." Uh-oh. The British Army was hardly marching down Wall Street, but 10 ships had docked downriver on Staten Island. Ruth and me followed behind Madam and Lady Seymour as we strode with the crowd to the Battery as fast as our skirts would allow. Madam quivered with excitement, but was wise enough not to say a word, for we found ourselves in a crowd of rebels furious about the arrival of King George's boys. Someone fired a cannon a stone's throw from where we stood. Gunpowder smoke drifted across the crowd as soldiers started running every which way, carrying on about "order this" and "orders that." Someone fired a musket, and a woman shrieked. 2 more muskets blasted. Rough voices commanded the firing to cease. Mothers chased after their children. 5 men in frontier leggings and leather shirts sprinted past us, rifles at the ready. Should I grab Ruth and run for the barracks? Could we slip away to the sanctuary in the commotion? I looked for Colonel Regan, but saw him not. None of the men were familiar to me. Had I waited too long? The cannons fired once more and then fell silent. The ships were too far away to be hit, and the cannonballs fell into the river. Another musket cracked fire, but this was more distant. The crowd had settled some, and soldiers were lining up in orderly fashion, thanks to their barking officers. "Everyone, please disperse," shouted a broad-shouldered man in a crisp blue coat and a sleek, freshly powdered wig. "There is no danger here. Go about your business." "Come now," Madame said. "We will leave this rabble." She walked away with Lady Seymour. I went to follow them, but Ruth would not move. She stood rooted to the ground, trembling against my leg as if a gale were blowing. "Ruthie," I patted her back, "it's over now. The noise is gone. No more bangs." I reached to pry her fingers from me. They were stiff and shaking. She was in the grip of a fit, a small one. "Oh, Lord, I beseech you," I said. Madame had stopped and was watching us. "Come along, girl," she snapped. "Turn your sister loose and run ahead to prepare the meal." Ruth quivered, her teeth chattering in her head. She's a wee bit frightened, ma'am," I explained. "Never heard a cannon go off before." "Neither have I," added Lady Seymour. "She'll feel better once she starts to walk." "Please, Lord, hear what Mrs. said, Ruth. Walking is the best thing. Please keep her on her feet. Please make it stop. We have work to do, baby girl." My voice was as false as my smile. "Please." I stepped forward, pushing Ruth ahead as I went. The trembling stopped, but her body went limp. I picked her up and settled her on my hip, her head on my shoulder, as if she had fallen asleep. Lady Seymour frowned in concern. "Is she poorly?" Meaning, is she sickly? Madame cast a suspicious eye at us. "No, ma'am," I lied. "She's just tired." "She is not suffering her particular ailment, is she?" Madame asked, her voice cutting like a blade. "No, ma'am," I lied again. "She helped carry out the ashes this morning, and it tired her." Madame glared a moment longer at me. Lady Seymour stepped in front of Madame. "The heat affects small children more than most. Make sure your sister drinks some water before any more chores." See, even Lady Seymour understands. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am." I bobbed a clumsy curtsy and walked as fast as I could with the limp burden in my arms, beseeching with every step. British ships continued to sail up the river all the day and all the night. Madame set us to polishing the silver in the hope that we'd soon be serving dinner to the British High Command. On Monday morning, Becky sent me to the washerwoman with a giant basket of dirty tablecloths and serviettes. So many ships had arrived by then, hundreds, folks said, with thousands of soldiers, that we could see the patches of white sail far down the harbor. The washerwoman's, it's kind of like a laundry, the washerwoman's home stood empty. A neighbor said she had fled at first light, terrified at the thought of invasion. She wasn't the only one. I carried the basket of linen back to the house on Wall Street, put a pot of water over the fire, and gathered the soap and the scrubbing board. Becky was off in search of a seamstress, so Ruth helped me haul the water to the wash tub in the backyard. I gave her a small bucket and sliver of soap, and she got to work washing a pair of stockings and singing to herself. She showed no ill effects of the small fit at the Battery. It had been a brief shower, not a thunderstorm. As I scrubbed, my mind ran in circles, like a dog chasing its tail. I should take Ruth and march down to the Battery. I should demand payment for helping with the arrests. No, demand payment. I should politely ask the colonel to fulfill his promise as a gentleman would. I should write a letter to the general. I should beg Curzon to beg Mr. Bellingham to beg whoever it is to get us out of here. I flopped the tablecloth into the rinse tub and started in on a shift that had gotten mixed in with the table linens. Ruth dropped her stockings in the rinse bucket and loaded her bucket with rocks. "Oh, we don't wash rocks, Ruth," I explained. "But they're dirty," she said. "That is truth," I said. The rocks were dirty, and washing them kept her calm and away from Madame. "Okay, scrub away," I told her. There was no use in begging any more. The chances of them listening to me were as good as a snowball's chance in the devil's bake oven. I reached for the soap as Ruth flung her half-washed rocks, now muddy, not dirty, into the rinsing tub with the clean tablecloth. Before I could scold her, the back door slammed. I saw the flash of a yellow gown by the kitchen window. Madam had been watching us, no doubt, displeased that Ruth was washing rocks with the tablecloths. We must escape, I thought, soon. Oh boy. So Madam is really watching everything they do now, and that's making Isabel nervous, of course. Okay, I'm going to start chapter 20. We are not going to get through it, but we'll get to some of it. Okay. That week unspooled slowly with hot days and muggy, breathless nights. Militia units from the surrounding colonies piled into the city. Ordinary folk skedaddled out of it as fast as they could on their feet. The extra soldiers were not the cleanest sort, or maybe they were too busy drilling and making gunpowder cartridges to wash. Whatever the cause, New York soon smelled like a garbage pit, mixed with a fresh mountain of manure. The stench cooked under the midsummer sun. Madam's moods changed with the tide. One moment she floated on clouds of fancy, imagining her grand life once the British beat the rebels. Next, she fell into a melancholy grumbling about the lazy British commanders floating at anchor off Staten Island, observing New York through long spyglasses, but making no move to invade. She now carried with her a brocade pouch suspended from a red satin cord. Within the pouch lay a green flask filled with a calming elixir prescribed by their doctor. He advised her to drink from it whenever the need arose. She also took to walking around the house in her stocking feet, trying to catch me unawares as I scrubbed or dusted or polished, often with Ruth at my side. She said nothing during those encounters, but watched us with hungry hawk's eyes. It unnerved me. So Madam's walking around in stocking feet so that she can sneak up and watch Isabel and Ruth. The week after Hickey's hanging, Becky suffered a mild attack of the ague that had befallen so many soldiers. She grew pale and sweaty, but did not require purging or leeches. In her stead, I went to the market. So since Becky was sick now, Isabel's going to the market. Our needs were fewer now that we no longer fed the master and his companions. 'Twas a good thing, for farmers feared to come into the city, and there was less to choose from. More people fled every day, including the wives of General Washington and Colonel Knox and Brigadier Greene, her that folks said was such a big flirt. I searched for Curzon every day, but Bellingham's affairs kept him out of sight. I was afraid to seek out Colonel Regan, afraid that word would get back to Madam and our lives might be put in jeopardy. 10 days after the British flooded the river with their ships, news that the Congress had declared independence arrived in New York. The declaration was read to the troops from the steps of City Hall. The men cheered so loud it seemed to shake the whole island. I hurried from the egg cellar to see the cause of all the commotion. The cheering men danced and marched from Broadway, tossing their hats into the air and shouting across the river at the silent ships of England. They gathered into a mob on the bowling green around the massive statue of King George III. I stayed at the edge of the crowd, hoping for a glimpse of Curzon or soldier familiar from my visit to the Battery. The king was mounted on his horse, and the horse mounted on a white marble pedestal that rose to the height of 3 men standing one on top of the other. Both the horse and the man were fashioned larger than could be possible, but I suppose that was the way of kings. They were both made of gold that sometimes glittered in the sunlight, but dulled when the clouds interfered. So in the middle of that common, that it's like a park, is a statue of the king on his horse. And she's saying that the statue is 3 times higher than the king could ever be tall. But she says that's kind of how kings are. They want to be larger than life. Okay, so sounds like the Declaration is being read. Stay tuned.